My mom promised to be my caretaker after major spinal surgery. Instead, I woke up from anesthesia to a text saying they were drinking champagne in Aspen. When I begged my sister for help, she told me to stop being selfish and let them enjoy their vacation. They thought they left a helpless administrative assistant behind to fend for herself. They did not know they had just declared war on the city's most ruthless crisis manager. By the time they landed back in Chicago, I owned their debt, their house, and their darkest secrets. But before I tell you how I made them regret every single one of those 75 missed calls, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to be your own hero when family failed you. I am Zora, 34 years old, and my job is to clean up messes for the most powerful people in Chicago. When a senator gets caught in a scandal or a CEO needs a reputation scrub, they call me. I live in the shadows, fixing problems before they hit the news. To my family, however, I am just Zora, the boring secretary who pushes paper at a downtown firm. I keep my 7-figure income and my actual job title a secret because I learned a long time ago that in my family, money does not buy love, it only buys parasites. That Tuesday morning, the pain was not a metaphor. It was a physical, screaming reality. I had just undergone a spinal fusion surgery, a procedure where they literally screw metal into your backbone. The anesthesia was wearing off, leaving behind a cold, sharp agony that radiated from my neck down to my toes. My throat felt like I had swallowed broken glass. I blinked open my eyes, trying to focus on the sterile white ceiling tiles of the recovery room. The beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in the room until a nurse appeared in my field of vision. She looked kind but harried, holding a clipboard against her chest. "Welcome back, Zora," she said softly, checking my vitals. "The surgery went well, but you are going to be sore. We need to get your discharge papers ready. Is your mother here? You listed Bernice Williams as your ride and primary caretaker." I tried to speak, but my voice was a croak. I swallowed and tried again. "She should be in the waiting room. She promised she would be here." The nurse frowned and walked over to the phone on the wall. "Let me page the waiting room again." She might have stepped out for coffee. I closed my eyes, fighting the nausea that came with the pain meds. Mom had made a big show of this. For weeks, she had told everyone at church how she was going to nurse her poor single daughter back to health. She had even moved a bag of clothes into my apartment the day before. "We are going to have a girls' week," she had said, beaming. "Just you and me, Zora. I will make my famous gumbo." I wanted to believe her. Despite everything, despite the years of her favoring my younger sister Tasha, despite the constant digs about my lack of a husband, I wanted to believe that when I was literally cut open on an operating table, my mother would show up. The nurse came back, her expression tight. "Zora, there is no one in the waiting room. Security says no one has checked in under that name today. Do you want to call her?" Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the drug haze. I reached for my phone on the bedside table. My fingers felt like clumsy sausages as I dialed my mother's number. It rang, and rang, and rang. Finally, on the last ring before voicemail, she picked up. The background noise was deafening. I heard the distinct hum of a jet engine and the clinking of glasses. "Mom," I whispered. "I am out of surgery. Where are you?" "Oh, Zora." Her voice was bright, too loud, and completely unbothered. "I am so glad you are awake. Listen, honey, the craziest thing happened. You know Brad, right? He is just a miracle worker." Brad was my brother-in-law, a white investment banker who had married my sister Tasha 2 years ago. He was the family idol, the man who could do no wrong, even though his smile never quite reached his eyes when he looked at me. "What about Brad?" I asked, the pain in my back throbbing in time with my heartbeat. "He found this incredible last-minute deal for a ski trip to Aspen, first-class tickets, Zora, a private chalet. He said it was a once-in-a-lifetime networking opportunity for him and your father. We had to leave immediately. We are literally on the tarmac right now." I could not process the words. "You left Mom. I cannot walk." "The doctor said I need 24-hour care for the first 3 days. You promised." "Oh, stop being so dramatic, Zora. You are a big girl. You are tough. Besides, Brad said that surgery is routine these days. Just call an Uber or hire a nurse. You have savings from that little secretary job, do not you? But Mom, I stammered, tears stinging my eyes, I cannot get into an Uber. I cannot even sit up. Look, the flight attendant is telling me to turn off my phone, she said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Do not ruin this for your sister. Tasha has been so stressed lately. She needs this break. We will bring you back a souvenir. Love you, bye. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, the silence of the hospital room rushing back in to crush me. A souvenir. They were bringing me a souvenir while I lay here unable to lift my own head. The nurse was watching me, her face a mask of pity. I hated pity. I had spent my whole life avoiding it. Is she coming? The nurse asked gently. No, I said, my voice hardening. There was a mix-up. She is not coming. We cannot release you to a rideshare service, Zora, the nurse said, looking at my chart. It is against hospital policy for a spinal fusion patient. You need a responsible adult to sign you out and transport you. If you do not have anyone, we will have to transfer you to a rehab facility, but your insurance might not cover it without prior authorization. I closed my eyes. A rehab facility meant sharing a room with strangers, eating terrible food, and losing the privacy I desperately needed to recover. I had the money. I had plenty of money. But revealing that meant revealing the life I had carefully kept hidden from my family. But right now, looking at the nurse's sympathetic face, I realized I did not have a choice. Hand me my bag, please, I said. I dug through my old, worn-out purse. My family thought I carried it because I could not afford better. In reality, I carried it because it blended in. I reached into a hidden zippered pocket and pulled out a sleek black metal card. The Centurion card from American Express, the invite-only black card. The nurse's eyebrows shot up into her hairline when she saw it. I need you to call the concierge service on the back of this card, I said, my voice steady despite the pain. Tell them Zora requires their medical transport team. I want a private ambulance and a 24-hour private nurse sent to my penthouse, and tell them to bill it as a business expense under Crisis Management Solutions. The nurse took the card, looking from it to me, reevaluating everything she thought she knew about the woman in the hospital gown. While she made the call, my phone buzzed. A notification from Instagram. I opened the app. There at the top of my feed was a photo posted by my sister Tasha. It was a selfie taken in the first-class cabin of a plane. Tasha was holding a flute of champagne, her lips puckered in a duck face. My mother was next to her, beaming, wearing a fur coat she definitely could not afford. My father and Brad were in the row behind them, giving a thumbs up. The caption read, "Wheels up to Aspen. Nothing but the best for the hardest-working family in Chicago. Blessed. Family first. Black excellence." I stared at the photo. Family first. The rage started in my stomach, hot and heavy, mixing with the surgical pain, until I could not tell where the incision ended and the anger began. They had not just forgotten me. They had traded me. They had traded my health and my safety for a chance to pretend they were wealthy, to pretend they belonged in a world that Brad dangled in front of them like a carrot. They thought I was just the help, the quiet, reliable Zora, who would figure it out, who would take the bus home and suffer in silence. I took a screenshot of the post. Then I opened my contacts and found Tasha's name. I typed a single message, "Enjoy the snow. I hope it was worth it." I locked my phone and laid it on my chest. The private nurse would be here in an hour. I would go home to my beautiful empty apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city I secretly helped run. I would heal. But as I lay there feeling the metal screws in my spine, I realized something else had been fused today: my resolve. They wanted a luxurious vacation. Fine. I would make sure it was the most memorable trip of their lives. I closed my eyes and began to draft a plan in my head. Step 1 was recovery. Step 2 was research. Because nobody, not even family, walks away from a crash site without checking for survivors unless they want the survivor to come after them. And I was coming for them. The silence in the recovery room was not peaceful, it was heavy and suffocating. After the nurse left to arrange the paperwork, I was alone with the rhythmic beeping of the monitor and the throbbing in my back that felt less like surgery and more like someone had taken a sledgehammer to my spine. My throat was parched dry as dust, and the plastic pitcher of water sat on the bedside table just out of reach. It might as well have been on the moon. I stared at it, trying to will my arm to move, but the connection between my brain and my body felt severed by the trauma and the drugs. I needed to move. I needed to prove to myself that I was not as helpless as my mother's dial tone had made me feel. I gritted my teeth and shifted my weight. A bolt of lightning shot up my spinal column, white-hot and blinding. I gasped, but I pushed through it, gripping the metal rail of the bed. If I could just sit up, I could reach the water. I could call a car service. I could handle this. That was my mantra. I handle things. I handle scandals for senators. I handle bankruptcies for CEOs. I can handle getting out of a hospital bed. I swung my legs over the side. The room spun. The floor looked miles away. I planted my feet and pushed. For a second I was standing. For a second I was triumphant. Then my knees buckled. It was not a slow collapse. It was sudden and humiliating. I hit the linoleum floor hard, my hip taking the brunt of the impact, sending a fresh wave of agony through my fused vertebrae. I tried to scream, but only a whimper came out. I lay there on the cold tiles in my thin hospital gown, staring at the dust bunnies under the bed. I was a 34-year-old woman who made more money in a month than my father made in a year, and I was lying on the floor in my own urine because the catheter had leaked when I fell. I reached for my phone, which had fallen with me. The screen was cracked. Fitting. I opened my messages. My mother had made it clear she was unavailable. My father did whatever my mother told him to do. That left Tasha, my baby sister, the one whose tuition I had paid when she decided she wanted to study fashion marketing in New York, the one whose credit card debt I had quietly wiped out 3 times so her husband Brad would not find out. Surely Tasha would have a heart. Surely she would realize this was not a joke. I typed with shaking thumbs. Tasha, please. Mom left me here. I fell trying to get up. I am on the floor. I cannot walk. Please tell them to turn around. I need help. I watched the 3 little dots appear. She was typing. Then she stopped. Then she typed again. I held my breath, praying for empathy, praying for her to say they were coming back. The message popped up. Oh my God. Zora, stop. Do not guilt-trip me right now. We are literally about to take off. Brad has been working 80-hour weeks. He needs this to decompress. We are here to relax and ski, not to play nurse because you are too cheap to hire one. You are ruining the vibe before we even get there. Figure it out. Then a second message. And do not text Mom. She is already stressed about her outfit for the dinner tonight. Let us live. I stared at the screen until the backlight timed out and the phone went dark, ruining the vibe. My spinal surgery was ruining the vibe of their vacation. A vacation paid for with my credit card. I did not cry. I think I had run out of tears. Instead, a cold, hard clarity settled over me, replacing the panic. I pressed the nurse call button on the side of the bed from my position on the floor. When the nurse ran in and saw me, she gasped, calling for orderlies to help lift me. I let them handle me like a rag doll. I did not apologize. I did not explain. When they got me back into the bed, I asked for my bag again. I pulled out the black metal card. I need a private duty nurse. I told the charge nurse, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. I need someone who can travel with me to my apartment and stay for 72 hours. I do not care what it costs. Get the agency on the phone now. It took an hour of staring at the ceiling while my family flew first class to Colorado. When the agency nurse arrived, she was a no-nonsense woman named Marcus. Not the warm maternal figure I had secretly hoped for, but he was strong and efficient. He looked at my chart, looked at me, and simply said, "Let us get you home, ma'am." The ride home was a blur of potholes and pain. I had hired a private medical transport van because I could not sit upright in a sedan. Lying on the stretcher in the back, watching the gray Chicago skyline pass by upside down, I felt a profound sense of isolation. This city was full of people who owed me favors, people whose careers I had saved, but I could not call them. To them, I was the invincible fixer. If they saw me broken like this, the illusion would shatter. We arrived at my building. It was a sleek glass tower in the Loop, the kind of place with a doorman who wore a suit and knew not to ask questions. The doorman rushed out when he saw the ambulance, looking concerned. "Miss Williams, are you all right?" he asked, holding the door. "Fine, Henry. Just a procedure," I lied through my teeth. Marcus, the nurse, got me into the wheelchair and took me up to the penthouse. When he opened the door, the silence of the apartment hit me harder than the hospital floor had. It was a beautiful space. Minimalist, modern, cold. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over Lake Michigan, which was a churning gray mass under the winter sky. "This place is huge," Marcus muttered as he wheeled me toward the master bedroom. "It is," I said. "And it is empty." He got me settled into the adjustable bed I had bought specifically for this recovery. He set up the IV stand and arranged the pain medications on the nightstand. He was professional and distant, exactly what I paid for. "Do you need anything else before I take my break in the guest room?" he asked. "No, thank you." He closed the door, leaving me alone in the dim light. I lay there listening to the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen down the hall. I looked around the room. The expensive Italian furniture, the art on the walls, the closet full of designer suits that I wore to meetings where I commanded the room. It all felt meaningless. I picked up my iPad and opened my banking app. I needed to see it. I needed to see the numbers to remind myself of the truth. I scrolled through the transaction history of the joint account I shared with my mother. I had set it up 5 years ago, ostensibly to help them with groceries and bills in their retirement. Mortgage payment for their house in the suburbs, $2,800. Paid by me. Car lease for my father's Cadillac, $800. Paid by me. Utilities, insurance, phone bills. All paid by me. I scrolled back further. A transfer of $10,000 6 months ago. The memo said house repairs. I remembered that. Mom said the roof was leaking. But then I saw a Facebook post from that same week of Tasha showing off a new Chanel bag and a weekend trip to Miami. I scrolled to the credit card I had given Tasha for emergencies. The bill was auto-paid from my account. Sephora, Nordstrom, a spa in the Gold Coast, Uber Eats orders for sushi and steak, thousands of dollars, every single month. I had told myself I was being a good daughter, a good sister. I was the successful one, so it was my duty to lift them up. I told myself they appreciated it. I told myself they loved me, for me, not for the safety net I provided. But today, when I was bleeding and broken on a hospital floor, they told me I was ruining their vibe. They were in Aspen right now, skiing on snow, that I bought, wearing gear, that I paid for, drinking wine that was charged to my name. And they could not even be bothered to make sure I got home safely. I looked at the total outflow for the last year. It was enough to buy a small house. It was enough to start a scholarship fund. It was enough to travel the world 3 times over. And in exchange, I got 75 missed calls only when they needed something. I got guilt trips. I got told I was boring and bossy and ungrateful. The pain in my back flared hot and vicious, but it was nothing compared to the ice spreading through my chest. I had been their bank. I had been their retirement plan. I had been their safety net. I closed the banking app and opened my contacts. I found the number for my personal wealth manager. It was after hours, but he would answer for me. I did not call him yet. I wasn't ready to detonate the bomb just yet. I wanted to let them enjoy their first night in Aspen. I wanted them to order the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu. I wanted them to feel safe and rich and entitled. I lay back against the pillows and watched the snow start to fall outside the window. It was beautiful and cold, just like the revenge that was beginning to take shape in my mind. They told me to figure it out. They told me not to be selfish. Fine. I would figure it out. And for the first time in my life, I would be completely, entirely selfish. I closed my eyes and let the pain meds pull me under. Tomorrow the nurse would help me walk. Tomorrow I would start healing. And tomorrow I would start reviewing the fine print of every single financial tether that bound my family to me. Because if they wanted to cut ties, I would make sure they realized exactly who was holding the scissors. The first 72 hours after spinal surgery were a blur of agony and humiliation that stripped away every layer of dignity I had spent my career building. Marcus, the private nurse I had hired, was worth every penny of the exorbitant fee he charged. He was a mountain of a man with gentle hands who lifted me when my legs refused to work and helped me to the bathroom without a flicker of judgment. But even his professional stoicism could not mask the pathetic reality of my situation. I was a grown woman, a powerhouse in the Chicago business world, and I was reduced to sipping water through a straw and whimpering when the bedsheets moved too quickly against my incision. On the second day, I insisted Marcus go down to the lobby to get himself a proper meal. I needed to be alone. I needed to prove to myself that I was not completely invalid. As soon as the heavy door clicked shut behind him, I tried to reach for the carafe of water on the nightstand. My fingers brushed the condensation on the glass, but my depth perception was off from the painkillers. The pitcher tipped. I watched in slow motion as it crashed to the floor, water splashing across the expensive hardwood, soaking the rug. I stared at the puddle. My throat was burning. I needed that water. I tried to lean over, but my spine screamed in protest, a white-hot line of fire that made my vision gray out. I grit my teeth and slid my legs off the bed. My feet hit the floor, but they felt like they belonged to someone else. I slid down controlled and slow until I was on my hands and knees. There I was, Zora the fixer, the woman who made senators tremble, crawling on her hands and knees across her own bedroom floor to lick water off a spilled pitcher because her family was too busy skiing to hand her a glass. I sat there on the wet rug, my back throbbing, and I felt a laugh bubble up in my chest. It was a dark, jagged sound. This was my reality. I dragged myself back to the bed, unable to lift myself up, and simply leaned my head against the mattress, waiting for the pain to subside. My phone, which I had left on the bed, lit up. The screen glowed in the dim room, a beacon from a world I was currently locked out of. It was an Instagram notification. Tasha is live now. I should not have looked. I knew I should not have looked. But my thumb moved of its own accord, tapping the screen. The video loaded instantly. The connection was crisp, broadcasting in high definition from 2,000 miles away. The screen was filled with blinding white snow and the rustic timber beams of a luxury lodge. Tasha's face filled the frame, her skin glowing, her makeup perfect. She was wearing a white fur headband that I knew cost $300 because I had seen the charge on my statement last week. "Hey guys," she chirped, waving at the camera. "Just checking in from Aspen. The altitude is crazy, but the vibes are immaculate. We just finished a private ski lesson, and now we are heading to the Après Ski Lounge." She panned the camera around. My mother was sitting by a roaring fire, holding a glass of red wine, laughing at something my father was saying. They looked the picture of health and happiness. They looked like a couple without a care in the world, certainly not a couple whose daughter was lying on a wet rug in Chicago recovering from major surgery. And then the camera landed on Brad, my brother-in-law. He was leaning against the bar holding a bottle of Dom Perignon. He looked every inch the successful finance bro he pretended to be, with his designer sunglasses and his Patagonia vest. He saw the camera and flashed a blinding, arrogant smile. "Say hi to the fans, babe," Tasha giggled. Brad raised the bottle in a mock toast. "Cheers to the good life," he drawled, his voice slurring slightly. "You know I feel bad for all the suckers stuck in their cubicles today, pushing paper filing reports, answering phones. It must suck to be boring." He took a long swig of the champagne. Tasha laughed, a high tinkling sound that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. "Stop it. You are terrible." But seriously, we are so blessed. Hard work pays off, right, guys? Brad winked at the camera. Only if you are smart enough to work the system, babe. Some people are worker bees and some people are queens. We are royalty. The live stream ended. I stared at the black screen, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Worker bees, boring, cubicles. He was talking about me. That was the narrative they had constructed. Zora, the admin assistant. Zora, the worker bee who paid the bills so they could play royalty. Brad, who I suspected had not closed a real deal in 6 months, was drinking $300 champagne that I paid for and mocking me for the job he thought funded his lifestyle. He called me a sucker. I reached for the bottle of pain medication on the nightstand. My hand shook as I shook out 2 pills. I swallowed them dry, the bitter taste coating my tongue. I did not want to feel this. I did not want to feel the physical pain of my back or the emotional evisceration of watching my family laugh at my expense. I closed my eyes, letting the darkness take me, but the anger remained a cold, hard knot in the center of my chest. They thought I was boring. They thought I was safe. They had no idea that the boring administrative assistant they mocked was the only thing standing between them and financial ruin. And they had just insulted the bank manager. I slept for hours, a fitful drug-fueled sleep, haunted by images of snow and champagne. I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing. It was a ringtone I reserved for only a handful of people. The red phone list. The clients who paid a retainer just for the privilege of my picking up at 3 in the morning. I fumbled for the phone. It was Marcus calling from the other room. No, Marcus was in the kitchen. I could hear him cooking. I looked at the screen. It was Silas Vance. Silas was a real estate mogul who owned half the skyline of Chicago. He was ruthless, brilliant, and one of the few people who knew exactly what I did, because I had saved his reputation after a particularly nasty divorce settlement threatened to expose his business dealings. I cleared my throat, wincing as I sat up. Mr. Vance, I answered, forcing my voice to sound strong and alert. To what do I owe the pleasure? Zora Silas's voice was gravelly and low. I hope I am not disturbing you. I heard you were under the weather. I am fine, Silas. Just a minor procedure. Back at my desk soon. What do you need? I have a situation, he said, getting straight to the point. I am looking at a new partnership for a development project in the South Loop, a mixed-use high-rise. The potential partner is a boutique investment firm. They talk a big game, lots of flash, lots of projected returns. But something smells off. What kind of off? I asked, my brain automatically shifting into work mode. The pain in my back receded slightly, pushed aside by the adrenaline of the puzzle. The numbers look too perfect, Silas said. And the lead partner, a guy named Miller, he is throwing around names of investors that I know for a fact are not involved. He claims he has secured funding from sources that usually do not touch this level of risk. I need a scrub, Zora. A deep one. I need to know who this guy really is, where his money actually comes from, and if he is leveraging assets he does not have. I reached for my iPad, wincing as I adjusted my pillows. What is the name of the partner? I asked, opening my encrypted database app. Brad Miller, Silas said. My hand froze over the screen. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Did you say Brad Miller? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Yeah, Silas said, sounding impatient. Works for a firm called Apex Capital, or at least that is what his business card says. White guy, late 30s, likes to hear himself talk. Do you know him? A slow, terrifying smile spread across my face in the dark room. It was the smile of a predator who just realized the prey has walked directly into the trap. I know of him, I said, my voice smooth as silk. Apex Capital. Let me do some digging, Silas. I can have a preliminary report for you by tomorrow morning. Good, Silas said. I knew I could count on you. If he is dirty, Zora, I want to bury him. I do not do business with frauds. I will find everything there is to find Silas. Consider it done. I hung up the phone and stared at the wall. Brad Miller, my brother-in-law. The man who was currently in Aspen drinking my champagne and calling me a sucker. He was trying to scam Silas Vance, the most dangerous businessman in Chicago. Brad had told the family he was a vice president at a major bank. He had told Tasha he was handling high-level mergers. But here he was, pitching a deal to Silas Vance under a boutique firm name I had never heard of. I opened my laptop. The pain in my spine was gone, replaced by a cold electric focus. I did not need to wait for tomorrow. I knew exactly where to look. I navigated to the State Licensing Board website. I typed in Brad Miller. No active license for financial advising. No active broker license. I went to the State Employment Verification Database, a tool I paid a fortune to access. Apex Capital was registered 6 months ago. The registered agent address was a P.O. box in a strip mall. And then I checked his employment history. The major bank he claimed to work for terminated for cause 6 months ago. The cause was listed as misappropriation of petty cash and falsifying expense reports. He was unemployed. He had been unemployed for half a year. I looked at the Instagram photo again. The first-class tickets, the chalet, the expensive gear. If he was unemployed and he was trying to scam Silas Vance for seed money, then who was paying for his life? Who was paying for Tasha's bags? I logged into my bank account again. I looked at the supplementary credit card I had given Tasha. The limit was $25,000. It was maxed out. I looked at the mortgage payments for my parents' house. It was not just that they were using me, it was that Brad was building a house of cards using my foundation, and he was about to bring the wrath of Silas Vance down on my entire family. But Silas had hired me, and for the first time in my career, the target of my investigation was sleeping in a bed I had paid for. I pulled up the credit report for Brad Miller. It took minutes to bypass the security questions because I knew his mother's maiden name and his first pet. The screen filled with red, defaulted loans, maxed out cards, and a second mortgage on a house he did not own. He had taken out a second mortgage on my parents' house, the house that was in my mother's name. I sat back the breath, leaving my lungs in a rush. My mother did not know. Tasha did not know. They thought he was a genius. They thought he was their ticket to the high life. He was drowning, and he was dragging them down with him, and they were too busy mocking me to notice the water rising. I looked at the clock. It was midnight in Chicago, 11 p.m. in Aspen. They were probably ordering another round. I opened a new file on my computer. I named it Project Snowfall. I was not just going to recover, I was going to ruin him. And I was going to save my family from financial annihilation, not because they deserved it, but because I would not let his failure tarnish my name. But first I had to let him think he was winning. I had to let him hang himself. I sent a text to Silas. I am on it. Do not sign anything. I found something interesting already. Then I lay back in the dark and waited for the sunrise. The solo struggle was over. The hunt had begun. I typed in my username and password. The two-factor authentication code pinged to my phone. I entered it. The dashboard loaded. I stared at the recent transactions column. My breath caught in my throat. It was not just the checking account. It was not just the travel card. There, right at the top of the summary, was a notification for a card I did not use. A platinum card I kept in a safe for absolute emergencies. A card with a limit that could buy a small island. The balance was not zero. I clicked on the account details. The transaction list populated, scrolling down the screen like a waterfall of betrayal. United Airlines, 4 tickets. First class, $12,000. The Little Nell Hotel Aspen. Deposit, $8,000. Aspen Ski Coma. Lift tickets and rentals, $4,000. Cloud9 Alpine Bistro. Lunch, $1,200. The total pending charges were staggering. They were burning through money at a rate that suggested they thought it was infinite. And then I saw the cardholder name on the supplementary card that had been issued 3 days ago. The card that had been overnighted to my parents' address while I was prepping for surgery. The cardholder name was Zora Williams. They hadn't just used the emergency card I gave Tasha. They had impersonated me. They had called the bank, likely my mother pretending to be me, and requested an emergency replacement card sent to their house claiming the original was lost. They had used my social security number, my mother's maiden name, the answers to security questions only my family would know. Brad did not pay for the trip. I did. I was paying for the champagne he was drinking while he toasted to the good life and called me a sucker. I felt the bile rise in my throat. This was not just taking advantage. This was identity theft. This was federal wire fraud. This was my mother, my father, my sister, and her criminal husband conspiring to rob me while I lay unconscious on an operating table. I looked at the date of the card issuance. It was the day before my surgery. They knew I would be under. They knew I would be out of commission. They had planned this. It was not a last-minute deal Brad found. It was a heist. I sat there in the silence of my penthouse, the numbers blurring through my tears. They did not leave me because they forgot. They left me because they needed to get out of town and start spending before I woke up and checked my phone. I gripped the edge of the laptop. The sadness evaporated, burned away by a white-hot rage that felt purifying. They wanted to play the high rollers. They wanted to live the luxury lifestyle on my dime. Fine. I would let them. For exactly 5 more minutes. I reached for my phone and dialed the number on the back of the card. Not the concierge this time. The fraud department. "Hello," I said when the operator answered, my voice steady and cold as a Chicago winter. "My name is Zora Williams. I am reporting a stolen card. And I want to report unauthorized usage in Aspen, Colorado. Yes, all of it. Decline everything." I hung up the phone. In Aspen, the sun was probably just setting. They were probably getting ready for dinner at some 5-star restaurant, ordering the Wagyu beef, laughing about how easy it was. The waiter was about to bring the check, and when he ran that card, their reality was going to crash harder than I did on the recovery room floor. I watched the snow falling outside my window and waited for my phone to ring. It was going to be a very entertaining evening. The voice on the other end of the line was calm, professional, and detached, the exact opposite of the hurricane raging inside my chest. The fraud specialist introduced himself as David, and I could hear the rhythmic clicking of his keyboard as he pulled up my file. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white against the dark screen. I needed to understand the mechanics of this betrayal before I could execute the punishment. I needed to know exactly how they had breached the fortress of my financial security. "Mr. Vance," I said, correcting myself quickly. "David, I am looking at my online statement. There are charges here I did not authorize, but more importantly, there is a card listed here that I do not recognize. A card ending in 4098. I do not carry that card. I have never seen that card." There was a pause on the line, a silence filled with the hum of data transferring across secure networks. "One moment, Ms. Williams," David said. "Let me verify the card issuance history. I see here that this is a supplementary platinum card. It was issued 3 days ago. The authorized user is listed as Bernice Williams." The air left my lungs. Bernice, my mother. "I did not authorize a card for Bernice Williams," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. David hesitated. "According to our logs, the request came through our priority line. The caller verified all security protocols. Mother's maiden name, your social security number, and the verbal password you set up on the account. They cited an emergency travel situation and requested expedited shipping to an address in Oak Park." The pieces clicked together with a sickening snap. The verbal password. I had given that to my mother 2 years ago when I was traveling in Europe, just in case something happened to my father, and they needed immediate access to funds for a hospital or a crisis. It was a fail-safe, a safety net I had woven to protect them. And she had weaponized it. She had waited until I was under the knife, until I was physically incapable of receiving a fraud alert, and she had used the keys I gave her to rob me. This was not just theft. This was a violation of the most intimate kind. She used my trust to fund a ski trip. Okay, I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and physical pain. I want you to read me the recent activity on that card. All of it. I need to know the extent of the damage. Certainly, David said. The tone of his voice shifted. He saw it now. He saw the pattern. Let us see. We have a charge from yesterday. United Airlines. $12,400. That appears to be 4 round-trip tickets, first-class Chicago to Aspen. $12,000. I closed my eyes. I had paid for my own surgery out of pocket because my insurance deductible was high. That $12,000 was my physical therapy budget for the next 6 months. Continue, I said. There is a charge for the Little Nell Hotel. $8,000. That looks like a deposit for a residence suite. The Little Nell, the only 5-star 5-diamond hotel in Aspen. They were not just staying in a hotel, they were staying in the best hotel in the city. A place I had dreamed of taking myself for my 35th birthday, a treat I had been saving for. They had stolen my dream vacation and taken it without me. Next, David said, his voice growing tighter. We have a charge at Montclair Aspen, $3,500. My eyes snapped open. Montclair, designer ski wear, Tasha. That had to be Tasha. She wouldn't be caught dead in rental gear. She needed the logo. She needed the photo op. $3,000 for jackets they would wear for 3 days and then shove in the back of a closet. And then David continued, we have a series of charges from this afternoon. Cloud9 Alpine Bistro. $1,200. That seems to be a lunch bill. Champagne, I whispered. They were spraying champagne. It was a tradition at Cloud9. Rich people spraying bottles of Veuve Clicquot that cost more than a mortgage payment. Brad had been spraying my money into the snow. Is there anything else? I asked, though I felt sick. Just a pending charge from about 20 minutes ago, David said. Aspen Skiing Company, private lessons, 4 people, $2,000. I did the math in my head. In less than 72 hours, my family had burned through nearly $30,000. $30,000. That was more than my father's pension paid in a year. That was a down payment on a condo. That was a college tuition, and they had blown it on snow, champagne, and ego. Ms. Williams, David asked gently, do you want to dispute these charges? I stared at the ceiling. If I disputed them, the bank would investigate. They would contact the merchants. They would contact the authorized user. It would be messy. It would be legal. But if I simply canceled the card, if I simply turned off the tap? No, I said. I do not just want to dispute them. I want to report this as criminal fraud. I did not authorize this user. The verbal password was used without my consent during a medical emergency when I was incapacitated. This is identity theft. Understood. David said, his professional demeanor hardening into the sharp edge of a fraud investigator. We take this very seriously. I am flagging the account immediately. The card ending in 4098 is now dead. No further charges will be approved. We will reverse the pending transactions where possible, but the merchants will be notified that the card is invalid and reported stolen. That means, I said, a dark satisfaction curling in my gut, that if they try to use it again, it will be declined. David finished. And if the merchants have already provided services based on a pre-authorization that we revoke, they will look to the customer for immediate payment. Immediate payment. Brad had no job. My parents had no savings. Tasha had a maxed-out credit card I was already paying for. When that bill came due, they would have nothing but empty pockets and snow. Do it, I said. Lock it all down. And David, yes, Ms. Williams. Flag my primary account too. No transfers, no withdrawals, no authorized users except me physically present with 2 forms of ID. I want my assets frozen tighter than a glacier. Done, he said. Is there anything else? No, I said. That will be all. Thank you, David. I hung up the phone and let it drop onto the mattress. The silence in the room was different now. It wasn't the silence of abandonment. It was the silence of a fuse burning down. $30,000. They had tried to steal $30,000 from me. They had looked at me lying in a hospital bed and seen nothing but an ATM. They didn't see a daughter. They didn't see a sister. They saw a resource to be mined until it was empty. I looked at the clock. It was dinner time in Aspen. They would be at a restaurant. Maybe Matsuhisa. Maybe checking out the wine list. Brad would be leaning back in his chair telling the waiter to keep the appetizers coming. Tasha would be taking selfies with her new jacket. My mother would be smiling, thinking she had finally made it. They were about to have the most expensive meal of their lives. I didn't call them to scream. I didn't send a text warning them. That would be a mercy, and I was fresh out of mercy. I wanted the humiliation to be public. I wanted the decline to happen when the waiter ran the card in front of their new friends. I wanted them to feel the cold reality of their own poverty crash down on them while they were playing pretend. I pulled the blankets up to my chin, the physical pain in my back, a dull throb, compared to the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I had spent my life fixing their mistakes. I had spent my life quietly cleaning up the messes Brad made, the messes Tasha made. I had been the safety net. Tonight, I cut the net. I reached for the remote and turned on the television, finding a news channel. I watched the ticker scroll by, waiting for the phone to ring, waiting for the inevitable explosion. It didn't take long. 20 minutes later, my phone lit up. Tasha. Then again. Tasha. Then my mother. Then Brad. I watched the names flash on the screen, a parade of panic. I didn't touch it. I let it ring. Once, twice, 10 times. Let them panic. Let them sweat. Let them try to explain to a manager why the black card was suddenly a piece of scrap metal. I smiled, a cold, thin expression in the darkness. Welcome to the real-world family. It's expensive here. The phone buzzed against the nightstand, a harsh, vibrating rhythm that sliced through the quiet of my penthouse. The screen lit up with Brad's name flashing urgently like a distress signal. I watched it for a moment, my heart rate steady, my breathing even. The pain in my spine was a dull throb now, a background noise to the symphony of chaos I knew was unfolding 2,000 miles away. I imagined the scene at the restaurant. The white tablecloths, the flickering candlelight, the hushed conversations of the wealthy, suddenly interrupted by the crass reality of a declined card. I picked up the phone. I didn't say a word. I just breathed into the receiver and waited. Zora, what the hell did you do? Brad's voice was a jagged tear in the silence, high-pitched and frantic. The background noise was a cacophony of clattering dishes and low murmuring voices. He sounded like a man drowning. The card, the waiter just came back. He said it's declined. He said it's reported stolen. They're threatening to call the cops. Zora, fix this. Fix this right now. I can't fix it, Brad. I said, my voice cool and detached, like I was discussing a minor scheduling conflict rather than their imminent arrest. Because it isn't broken. I reported the card stolen because it was stolen. By you. By my mother. By a family who left me on a hospital floor. Stolen. Are you insane? He screamed, and I heard a woman gasp in the background. It's a family card. Bernice authorized it. We are at Matsuhisa Zora. Do you know who is eating at the next table? My reputation. You are destroying my reputation. I have investors here. I have people watching me. You don't have a reputation, Brad. I cut in, my tone sharpening into a blade. I know about Sovereign Bank. I know about the petty cash. I know you were fired 6 months ago. You're not a banker. You're a liability. And you're not sitting there with investors. You're sitting there with my mother and my sister pretending to be a big shot on a credit limit you didn't earn. There was a stunned silence on the other end, the kind of silence that happens when a lie is stripped naked in public. Then I heard a scuffle. The phone fumbling between hands, and Tasha's voice pierced my ear, shrill and entitled. Zora, stop being a psycho, she yelled. Mom said it was fine. She said it was the emergency card. We needed a vacation. Brad has been so stressed and you have plenty of money. Why are you being so stingy? You're ruining everything. The manager is walking over here with 2 security guards. Do you want us to go to jail? Is that what you want? I want my money back, Tasha, I said. But since you spent it on champagne and Montclair jackets, you can't afford. I'll settle for justice. You told me not to guilt trip you. You told me I was ruining the vibe. Well, consider the vibe officially ruined. It's family money, she sobbed, the entitlement cracking into panic. We deserve this. You're just jealous because you're alone and miserable and we're happy. You're just a bitter, lonely secretary. I'm a bitter, lonely secretary who pays your bills, I said softly. Or I was, until 5 minutes ago. Now I'm just a stranger with a very good fraud protection plan. Mom, Tasha screamed away from the phone. She won't unlock it. She knows. She knows everything. My mother's voice came on then, trembling, breathless. Zora, baby, please. Listen to me. We didn't mean to hurt you. Brad said it would be okay. He said he'd pay it back as soon as his deal closed. Just call the bank. Tell them it was a mistake. They're going to kick us out. It's freezing outside. We don't have our coats. They took our coats at the check-in. You should have thought about that before you left your daughter unable to walk in an empty apartment, I said. The memory of the water pitcher crashing to the floor of me crawling through the puddle fueled my resolve. You left me to freeze, Mom. Now you know how it feels. Zora, please. That's my money, I said, my voice final. And you just spent the last of your credit. Goodbye. No, Zora. Wait. Brad's voice was back, savage and terrified. If you hang up, I swear to God. I tapped the red button. The line went dead. I lay the phone on my chest and stared at the ceiling. I could see it perfectly in my mind. The manager, polite but steely, asking them to vacate the premises, the security guards looming, the hush falling over the dining room as the rich family from Chicago was escorted out like common grifters. They would be standing on the sidewalk in the snow, the biting aspen wind, cutting through their expensive sweaters, realizing that their hotel reservation was also on that card, realizing their return flights were on that card. They were stranded in a playground for billionaires with empty pockets and a burned bridge. My phone lit up with a text from Tasha. I hate you. You are dead to us. Then one from Brad. You think you're smart. You have no idea what you just started. I smiled, a cold, humorless curving of my lips. They thought this was the end. They thought being kicked out of a restaurant was the worst of it. They didn't realize this was just the opening move. I hadn't even touched the house yet. I hadn't touched the car. I typed a quick message to Silas Vance, Target, confirmed engaging in high-level credit fraud. Currently stranded in Aspen. Do not engage. Full dossier incoming. I set the phone down and closed my eyes. The silence in the apartment was no longer heavy. It was the silence of a courtroom after the gavel has banged, judgment had been delivered. Now I just had to wait for the sentence to be carried out. The pounding on my front door was loud enough to wake the dead, or at least rattle the expensive art on my foyer walls. Marcus looked at me from the kitchen, a spatula in his hand, his eyebrows raised in a silent question. I nodded once. I knew who it was. They had made good time. It had been less than 24 hours since I cut off their funding, and they had evidently scrambled to find the first economy flight back to Chicago. The luxury vacation was over, and the reckoning had arrived. Marcus opened the door and my family spilled into my pristine penthouse like a mudslide. They were still wearing their ski clothes, though now the expensive jackets looked rumpled and out of place in my climate-controlled living room. My mother led the charge, her face a mask of righteous indignation that I had seen 1,000 times before. Tasha trailed behind her, looking red-eyed and sullen, dragging a suitcase that I knew she had not paid to check. And Brad brought up the rear, his jaw set in a line of aggressive arrogance that made my skin crawl. Zora, my mother shrieked before she was even fully in the room. Her voice echoed off the high ceilings. "How could you? Do you have any idea what you put us through?" We were humiliated. The police were almost called. I have never been so embarrassed in my entire life. She marched toward the bed, where I lay ignoring the IV stand, ignoring the pallor of my skin, ignoring the fact that I was physically unable to stand up to greet her. She stopped at the foot of the bed and threw her hands up. We were stranded in the snow, Zora. We had to beg the hotel to release our luggage. We had to put the flights on a credit card with an interest rate that is criminal. All because you decided to have a tantrum over a few dollars. A few dollars? I repeated, my voice raspy. It was $30,000, Mom. In 3 days. Bernice waved her hand dismissively as if $30,000 was the price of a gallon of milk. It is family money. It all comes out in the wash. You know we would have paid you back. But instead of acting like an adult, you cut us off. You stranded your sister. You stranded your parents. You are petty, Zora. You have always been petty, calculating every penny, keeping score. It is ugly. I looked at her, really looked at her. She was not worried about my health. She was not grateful that I had bankrolled her lifestyle for 5 years. She was angry because I had closed the tap. Brad stepped forward, then pushing past my mother to stand over me. He loomed, trying to use his height to intimidate me, a tactic that might have worked if I were not already lying down. "You really screwed up this time, Zora," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You clearly do not understand how high finance works. That trip was an investment. I was meeting with potential partners for my firm. You cutting the card did not just ruin a vacation, it jeopardized a multi-million-dollar deal." I stared at him, marveling at the audacity. He was unemployed. He was being sued for stealing petty cash. And he was standing in my bedroom lecturing me about high finance. "I am sorry, Brad," I said, keeping my face blank. I did not realize spending $1,200 on champagne spray was a business strategy. He laughed, a short, sharp bark. "That is why you are just an admin, Zora. You do not understand the cost of doing business. You have a scarcity mindset. I operate in a world of abundance. That money was seed capital, and frankly, I am insulted that you would treat me like a thief." He adjusted his cuffs, looking down at me with a sneer. "I will tell you what is going to happen," he continued. "Next month, when my liquidity event hits, I am going to write you a check. I will pay you back double what we spent, $60,000. Just to shut you up. And then Tasha and I are going to buy a place that makes this apartment look like a closet. But until then, you need to stop overreacting. You need to stop being so emotional and jealous just because we know how to enjoy life and you do not." Tasha chimed in from the doorway, her voice whining. "Yeah, Zora. You are just jealous because Brad takes care of me. You are lonely and bitter, so you want everyone else to be miserable. It is sad, honestly." I looked from Tasha to Brad to my mother. They were a united front of delusion. They truly believed they were the victims here. They believed I was the villain for stopping them from robbing me. And in that moment, looking at Brad's smug face, I realized something. If I kicked them out now, if I screamed and showed them the evidence of their fraud, it would be satisfying for about 10 minutes. But they would leave feeling like martyrs. They would spin the story. They would tell everyone I was crazy and vindictive. Brad would disappear. Tasha would cry to my parents, and they would all go back to their miserable lives, blaming me for their failures. That was not enough. I did not want them to leave angry. I wanted them to leave destroyed. And to do that, I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to walk willingly into the trap I was about to set. I needed a stage big enough for their ego to collapse on. I took a deep breath, wincing as my stitches pulled. I let my face crumble. I forced tears into my eyes. It was not hard, the pain was real enough. I am sorry," I stammered, letting my voice tremble. The room went silent. They blinked, surprised by the sudden shift. "It is the medication," I lied, looking down at my hands. "The doctors have me on these heavy painkillers. They make me paranoid. They make me irrational. I woke up alone and in pain, and I just panicked when I saw the charges. I was not thinking straight. I looked up at my mother, pleading with my eyes. You are right, Mom. I was being petty. I was scared and lonely, and I took it out on you. I should never have stranded you. That was unforgivable. My mother's posture softened instantly. The tension drained out of her shoulders. She stepped closer and patted my leg, a benevolent queen accepting the fealty of a peasant. Well, she said, smoothing her hair. At least you can admit it. We were very worried about you, Zora. We thought you had had a mental break. I looked at Brad. I am sorry I ruined your networking opportunity, Brad. I know you are good for the money. I know you are going to make it big. I felt left out. Brad puffed up his chest, his ego stroking instantly, soothing his anger. Yeah, well, these drugs can mess with your head. I forgive you, Zora. Just do not let it happen again. When you play in the big leagues, you cannot let emotions get in the way of capital flow. Thank you, I whispered. I want to make it up to you. I really do. I feel terrible that I ruined the trip. What did you have in mind? Tasha asked, her eyes narrowing with greed. I took a shaky breath. Mom, Dad, your 40th wedding anniversary is coming up in 2 months, isn't it? The ruby anniversary. My mother nodded slowly. Yes, it is. We were planning on just having a small dinner since you canceled our vacation. No, I said firmly. That will not do. You deserve to be celebrated. You deserve the best. I want to throw you a party. A real party. A gala. A gala, my mother repeated, her eyes lighting up. Yes, I said. We will rent out the ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton. We will invite everyone. The church members, the neighbors, Brad's business associates. We will hire a live band. Catered dinner. Open bar. I will pay for everything. It will be my apology to the family. I want everyone to see how successful and happy the Williams family really is. Brad smiled, a predatory grin. That sounds like a great idea, Zora. It would be a perfect venue for me to announce the launch of my new fund. A lot of high net worth individuals in that room. Exactly, I said. It will be a dual celebration, 40 years of marriage and the bright future of the family business. My mother clapped her hands together. Oh, Zora, the Ritz. I have always wanted a party at the Ritz. I can wear my red gown. We can invite the bishop. Tasha looked at me. Can I get a new dress? If Brad is announcing his fund, I need to look the part. Of course, I said. Custom made. Whatever you want. I want this to be perfect. They were beaming now. The anger was gone, replaced by the voracious hunger for status that drove every decision they made. They had forgotten the surgery. They had forgotten the insults. They only saw the dollar signs. I will start planning immediately, I said, leaning back against the pillows as if exhausted. Just, please forgive me. Let me do this for you. We forgive you, honey, my mother said, leaning down to kiss my forehead. Her lips were cold. Just get some rest. We will come back tomorrow to discuss the guest list. They left the apartment buzzing with excitement, talking over each other about centerpieces and invitations. They walked out the door feeling victorious. They thought they had won. They thought they had bullied me back into submission. As the door clicked shut, the tears on my face dried instantly. I stared at the closed door, my expression hardening into stone. They wanted a party. They wanted to show off to the world. They wanted a stage. I would give them a stage. And then in front of everyone, they tried to impress in front of the bishop and the neighbors and the investors. I would turn on the lights and show the world the rot beneath the floorboards. I reached for my phone and dialed my lawyer. Henry, I said when he answered, I need you to set up a shell company. I am going to buy some debt. A lot of debt. I want to own the mortgage on my parents' house. And I want to buy every cent of consumer debt attached to Brad Miller's name. There was a pause on the line. Zora, what are you doing? I am planning a party, Henry, I said. And I need to make sure I own the venue, the guests and the guests of honor. Get the paperwork ready. I am going shopping. The morning after the confrontation brought a flurry of activity that would have been impressive if it were not so predatory. My family arrived at my penthouse promptly at 10 o'clock, armed with bridal magazines, fabric swatches, and a level of entitlement that filled the room like a noxious gas. Marcus let them in his face a mask of professional neutrality, though I saw the way his jaw tightened when Brad threw his coat onto one of my pristine white armchairs without asking. I was sitting up in bed, propped by pillows, a tablet in my lap. I looked like the invalid recovering from surgery, but inside I felt like a general surveying a battlefield before the first cannon fire. Bernice wasted no time. She pulled a chair right up to the bedside, her eyes gleaming with a feverish intensity I usually only saw when she was gambling at the riverboat casino. She opened a thick binder she must have stayed up all night assembling. "We have to move fast, Zora," she said, not asking how I slept or if my pain levels were manageable. "The Ritz-Carlton has one date open in 2 months, the Grand Ballroom. It is destiny. I called them this morning and told them to hold it. The deposit is $20,000. $20,000 just to hold the room." I nodded slowly, playing the part of the chastened daughter, desperate to buy her way back into her mother's good graces. "The Ritz is perfect, Mom," I said, my voice soft. "It is elegant. It is exactly what you deserve for 40 years of marriage." "It is," she agreed, smoothing a page in her binder. "We need to invite everyone. The bishop, of course. The entire deacon board. The Johnsons from down the street. You know how she is always bragging about her son's law firm. Well, wait until she sees this. I want ice sculptures, Zora, swans, and a seafood tower. I want people to walk in and know that the Williams family has arrived." She was not planning an anniversary party. She was planning a coronation. She wanted to parade her imagined wealth in front of the very people she felt judged by. She wanted to prove that she was the queen of the South Side, and I was just the financier of her fantasy. I wrote it down on my tablet. Ritz-Carlton, Grand Ballroom, Seafood Tower, Ice Swans. Done. Tasha was next. She had been pacing the room, running her hands over my furniture, checking her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. She turned to me, a pout already forming on her lips. "I cannot wear off the rack, Zora," she whined. "Not if Brad is going to be introducing me to investors. I need something couture." I was looking at designers in New York, but there is no time to fly out there. I found a custom atelier on Oak Street. They do bespoke evening wear. I want gold. Gold sequins, floor length with a train. I want to look like Beyoncé at the Met Gala. A train. For a guest at an anniversary party. It was absurd. It was tacky. It was perfect. "You should shine, Tasha," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it was cracking my face. "You are the baby of the family. You should look like a star. Go to the atelier today. Put it on my card. Get the gold. Get the train. Get everything you want." Tasha squealed and clapped her hands, the sullen anger from yesterday completely evaporated now that the credit line was open again. She rushed over and hugged me, careful not to touch my incision, but her perfume was cloying and thick. "You are the best sister," she cooed. "I knew you were just stressed out yesterday. This is going to be so epic." Then it was Brad's turn. He had been standing by the window looking out at the Chicago skyline with a brooding, proprietary air, as if he were calculating how much of it he could own. He turned to me, hands in his pockets, rocking back on his heels. "Zora, let us talk strategy," he said, his voice dropping to that serious, business-like tone he used when he was trying to sound important. "This party is a great gesture, really. But we need to leverage it. I have a list of about 50 people I want to invite. Potential LPs for the fund, high net worth individuals, people I need to impress." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to me. I unfolded it. I recognized some of the names. Local business owners, a few doctors, people who had money but not enough money to lose it on a scam artist like Brad. These were not whales. These were retirees and small business owners, people whose nest eggs Brad would drain without a second thought. "We need a VIP section," Brad continued. "A private area in the ballroom where I can hold court. Top-shelf liquor. Louis the 13th cognac, cigars. I need them to see that Apex Capital is the real deal. If I close even 2 of these guys, Zora, I will pay you back for this whole party 10 times over. He believed it. That was the scariest part. He truly believed he was one handshake away from being a millionaire. He did not see himself as a fraud. He saw himself as a visionary who was temporarily embarrassed by a lack of funds. I looked at the list. I looked at his eager, greedy face. He was asking me to help him build the stage for his next con. He wanted me to be an accomplice in defrauding these people. But I saw something else. I saw a room full of witnesses. I saw 50 people who would be sitting there, drinks in hand, listening to him brag. Right before I pulled the rug out from under him, the more people he invited, the bigger the explosion would be. It is a brilliant idea, Brad. I lied, my voice steady. We will set up a lounge area near the stage. Leather armchairs. A private bar. You invite whoever you want. I want you to succeed. Brad grinned, a shark who just smelled blood in the water. That is what I am talking about. Synergy. We are a team, Zora. You provide the capital, I provide the vision. We are going to rule this city. They stayed for another hour, adding demands to the list. A professional photographer, a videographer, a 10-piece band, gift bags for the guests containing expensive chocolates and branded merchandise for Brad's fake company. I said yes to everything. I nodded. I took notes. I played the role of the dutiful, repentant daughter who just wanted to make her family happy. By the time they left, the estimated cost of the party was hovering around $150,000. It was an obscene amount of money for one night, but it was cheap for what I was buying. I was buying their total, absolute destruction. When the door finally closed behind them, the silence rushed back into the apartment, cool and cleansing. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 2 hours. My jaw ached from smiling. My skin crawled from their touch. Marcus walked in from the kitchen, placing a fresh glass of water on the table. He did not say anything, but he gave me a look that said he had heard everything and thought I had lost my mind. Do not worry, Marcus, I said, picking up the glass. I have not lost my mind. I have just found my focus. I picked up my phone. It was time for the second phase. The planning was done. Now came the execution. I dialed Henry, my personal attorney. He answered on the second ring. Zora, he said, I have the paperwork for the shell company ready. We called it Phoenix Holdings. What is the next move? Good name, I said. Now, Henry, I want you to go shopping, but not for dresses or flowers. I paused, letting the cold satisfaction wash over me. I want you to contact the bank that holds the mortgage on my parents' house in Oak Park. I know they are behind on payments. I want you to buy the note, buy the whole mortgage. I want Phoenix Holdings to be the lien holder. Done, Henry said, the sound of typing in the background. And the brother-in-law, Brad Miller, I said. He has judgments against him from 3 different credit card companies and a defaulted car loan. The debt collectors are probably selling those accounts for pennies on the dollar right now. Buy them. Buy every single cent of debt that man has. I want to own his credit score. I want to own his financial existence. Zora, Henry said, his voice cautious. You know this is aggressive. If you call the notes— I am not going to call them yet, Henry. I interrupted. I am going to hold them. I am going to frame them. And then, on the night of the party when he is drinking his Louis XIII and bragging to his investors, I am going to introduce myself as his new banker. I heard Henry let out a low whistle. Remind me never to cross you, Zora. Just get it done, I said. I want the papers signed and sealed by the end of the week. I hung up the phone. Outside, the winter sun was setting, casting long shadows across the city. My family was probably celebrating right now, toasting to their good fortune, laughing about how easily they had manipulated me back into submission. Let them laugh. Let them order the gold dress and the ice sculptures. Let them build their tower of lies as high as they wanted. I owned the ground beneath their feet, and I was about to trigger an earthquake. The next few days were a blur of wire transfers and legal documents signed digitally from my bed. Henry, my attorney, moved with the silent efficiency of an assassin in a three-piece suit. He set up Phoenix Holdings LLC in Delaware, a faceless entity with no direct paper trail leading back to me, unless you knew exactly where to dig. Through this shell company, I began to acquire the financial souls of my family. It was terrifyingly easy. My parents were 3 months behind on their mortgage in Oak Park. The bank was already preparing foreclosure proceedings, but banks are happy to sell non-performing notes to private investors if it means getting cash off their books immediately. I bought the mortgage for the full outstanding balance, plus a premium to expedite the transfer. I now own the roof over their heads. I own the walls where they hung their pictures and the dining table where they sat and judged me. Brad was even cheaper. His debt was toxic sludge that collection agencies were desperate to offload. I bought his defaulted car loan. I bought the judgments from 3 different credit card companies. I even bought a personal loan he had defaulted on from a peer-to-peer lending site. For less than the cost of the first-class tickets they had scammed from me, I became the owner of nearly $200,000 of Brad Miller's bad decisions. I was reviewing the acquisition documents on my tablet, feeling a cold, dark thrill when the intercom buzzed. It was Tasha. She did not wait to be buzzed up, she just announced she was coming up. I barely had time to close the files before she breezed into the apartment, looking frantic and annoyed. "I need shoes," she announced, dropping her purse on the kitchen counter without a coaster. "My feet are swollen from the flight, and none of my heels fit right. I know you have that pair of Louboutins you never wear because you have nowhere to go. I need them for the tasting at the Ritz today." She did not ask how I was feeling. She did not ask about the surgery. She marched straight past me toward my dressing room. I followed her, slowly wincing as my back protested the movement. My closet was my sanctuary. It was filled with the rewards of my hard work. Tailored suits from Savile Row, silk blouses from Paris, and shelves of designer shoes that I bought not to wear for men, but because I admired the craftsmanship. Tasha was already rifling through the shelves, pulling down boxes and tossing them aside if they were not what she wanted. She looked at a pair of limited edition Jimmy Choos and wrinkled her nose. "Too sparkly," she muttered. Then she found them. The classic black pumps with the red bottoms. She slipped her feet into them and preened in front of the full-length mirror. "Perfect," she said, turning to look at me. "These will look great with the dress I picked out. I am going to borrow these. And maybe that vintage Chanel clutch you have." "Where is it?" She started opening drawers, pulling out my handbags. I stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame for support. I watched her handle my possessions with greasy fingers, watched her treat my hard-earned treasures like a discount bin at a clearance sale. "Tasha," I said quietly, "that bag is an investment piece. Please be careful." "Oh, relax, Zora," she scoffed, pulling the Chanel out and stuffing her phone and lip gloss into it, stretching the delicate leather. "It is just a bag. It is not like you are using it. When was the last time you went out to a real party? Not a work thing, but a real event with a date." She looked at me, her eyes raking over my sweatpants and compression socks. "Face it, Zora," she said with a cruel little laugh. "You are basically a spinster. You are the old maid aunt who buys nice things to fill the void because she does not have a man. It is sad, really, but at least your stuff can get some use now. I am doing these shoes a favor by taking them out of this museum." The insult landed with a dull thud. Old maid, spinster, the void. This was how she saw me, not as the successful sister, not as the provider, but as a pathetic, lonely woman who accumulated nice things because she had no love in her life. She thought she was doing me a favor by stealing from me. I looked at her standing there in my shoes, holding my bag, looking young and beautiful, and completely rotten on the inside. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip the bag from her hands and throw her out. But I remembered the paperwork on my tablet. I remembered Phoenix Holdings. I forced a smile onto my face. It felt tight like a mask that did not quite fit. "You are right, Tasha," I said, my voice soft. "You should wear them. You look beautiful. You are going to be the star of the party. Why let them gather dust here?" Tasha smirked, satisfied that I had accepted my place in the hierarchy. "Exactly," she said. "Glad you finally get it. I will bring them back after the party. Maybe. If I do not scuff them." She breezed past me, smelling of my expensive perfume, which she had undoubtedly sprayed while I was not looking. "See you later, Zora," she called out over her shoulder. "Do not forget to transfer the deposit for the ice sculptures. Mom is freaking out." The door slammed shut. I stood in the silence of the hallway, staring at the empty spot on the shelf where the Chanel bag had been. I walked over to the window and looked down at the street. A few minutes later, I saw Tasha emerge from the building. She was strutting, checking her reflection in the glass of the lobby doors, oblivious to the fact that she was walking on borrowed time. "Go ahead, Tasha," I whispered to the glass. "Wear the shoes. Carry the bag. Look your best. Because this is the last time you are going to touch luxury. Enjoy it while it lasts. Because when the music stops, you are going to be barefoot in the cold." My phone chimed with a notification. It was a secure message from Henry. I opened it. Attached was a PDF document with a red stamp on the cover. "Confirmation of asset transfer." The body of the message was short and sweet. "It is done, Zora. Phoenix Holdings is now the legal lien holder for the property at 425 Maple Avenue. We also hold the assignment of debt for all listed accounts belonging to Bradley T. Miller. The paperwork is filed with the county clerk. You are officially their creditor." I read the message twice, letting the words sink in. I was not just their daughter or their sister anymore. I was not the doormat. I was the bank. I owned the roof over their heads. I owned the car Brad drove to his fake meetings. I owned the very ground they stood on while they looked down on me. They thought I was the old maid with nothing but empty things. They did not realize that while they were playing dress-up, I was buying the store. I typed a reply to Henry. "Excellent. Prepare the foreclosure notices and the demand letters, but do not serve them yet. Date them for the morning after the party. I want to hand-deliver them myself." I set the phone down on the kitchen island. I poured myself a glass of water, my hand perfectly steady. The pain in my back was still there, but it felt distant now, fueled by a cold, burning energy that was stronger than any medicine. I had the dress, I had the shoes, I had the venue, and now I had the leverage. The trap was set, the bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for the party to start. The doors of the grand ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton swung open to reveal a scene that looked less like an anniversary party and more like a coronation for a royal family that did not exist. I stood in the shadows near the entrance watching the guests arrive. The room was bathed in golden light refracting off the crystal chandeliers overhead. The air smelled of expensive perfume and the briny freshness of the massive seafood tower that dominated the center of the room, just as my mother had requested. Two ice swans with necks intertwined slowly wept into a silver basin of chilled shrimp and oysters. It was magnificent. It was excessive. It was entirely funded by the woman standing in the corner wearing a simple black dress that cost more than Tasha's entire wardrobe but looked unassuming enough to let me blend into the background. My mother Bernice was in her element. She wore the red gown she had been dreaming about, the fabric straining slightly at the seams, but she carried herself with the haughty grandeur of a woman who believed she had finally arrived. She stood at the receiving line next to my father Louis, who looked uncomfortable but compliant in his rented tuxedo. They greeted the guests with air kisses and boisterous laughter, playing the role of the successful matriarch and patriarch of a thriving dynasty. I watched as they welcomed the bishop, a man whose approval my mother craved like oxygen. She held his hand a little too long, gesturing around the room as if to say, "Look at what we built." She did not mention that the mortgage on her house was currently held by a shell company owned by the daughter she had not spoken to in an hour. Tasha was a vision in gold sequins, just as she had demanded. The dress was stunning, hugging her curves and trailing behind her in a pool of shimmering fabric, but my eyes were drawn to her feet. She was wearing my Louboutins, and clutched in her hand was my vintage Chanel bag, the leather already looking strained from being overstuffed. She paraded through the room like a peacock, stopping to pose for photos every 3 feet, making sure the light hit her just right. She looked wealthy. She looked pampered. She looked like a lie wrapped in silk. And then there was Brad. My brother-in-law had commandeered the VIP lounge area I had set up near the stage. He sat in a high-backed leather armchair swirling a glass of Louis XIII cognac that cost $3,000 a bottle. He was surrounded by a group of local businessmen, the doctors and small business owners he had targeted. I could hear his voice booming over the jazz band, throwing around buzzwords like leverage and synergy and high-yield returns. He was pitching them. He was using my party, my money, and my reputation to lure these men into his web. I saw one of the doctors, a kind man named Dr. Evans, who had treated me for strep throat when I was a child, lean in with interest. Brad nodded eagerly, pulling a business card from his pocket. The card for Apex Capital, the fake firm with the P.O. Box address. I felt a wave of nausea, but I pushed it down. Not yet. Let him dig the hole a little deeper. I moved through the crowd, acting the part of the dutiful daughter. I checked on the caterers. I directed guests to the bar. I smiled when people grabbed my arm and told me how wonderful it was that I could help out with the logistics. They assumed I was the event planner. They assumed I was the help. My family had done a thorough job of branding me. I found myself standing near a group of church ladies, the ones who wore hats big enough to have their own zip codes. They did not see me. "Bernice is so blessed," one of them whispered, sipping her punch. "Tasha married so well. That Brad is a banker, you know. Big time. And they are so generous to pay for all of this." "What about the other one, Zora?" another lady asked. "Oh, poor thing," the first one sighed. "Bernice says she tries hard, but she just cannot seem to get it together. Works as a secretary downtown, lives in a little apartment, no husband, no prospects. It is a shame, really, especially compared to Tasha." I turned away, my face burning. It wasn't just my mother saying it. It was the whole community. It was the narrative that had been spun for years, woven into the fabric of every Sunday service and potluck dinner. Zora the failure. Zora the charity case. Zora the invisible wallet. The band slowed down, playing a soft instrumental intro. The lights in the ballroom dimmed, leaving a spotlight on the stage. It was time for the speeches. My father went first. He climbed the stairs slowly, looking tired. He took the microphone and mumbled a few words about love and endurance and 40 years of marriage. He thanked everyone for coming. He thanked God. He did not thank me. He handed the mic to my mother, relief washing over his face as he stepped back into the shadows. Bernice took center stage. She glowed in the spotlight, feeding off the attention. She spoke for 10 minutes about the trials and tribulations of raising a family, painting a picture of sacrifice and triumph that bore little resemblance to the reality I knew. She talked about the values she had instilled in her children. She talked about the legacy of the Williams name. And then she turned to the VIP section, where Brad and Tasha were sitting. "We are so blessed to see the fruits of our labor," she said, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "We look at our daughter Tasha, our golden girl. She has brought such light and style into our lives. And her husband Brad, a titan of industry, who has been a son to us. We are so grateful to them for their generosity, for their success, and for hosting this incredible evening for us." Applause rippled through the room. Brad stood up and waved, looking for all the world like a conquering hero. Tasha blew kisses to the crowd. They were taking credit. They were actually taking credit for the party I had paid for in the room I had rented while wearing my clothes. And Zora, my mother, continued, her tone shifting. The warmth evaporated from her voice, replaced by a patronizing sweetness that set my teeth on edge. "Where is Zora?" I stepped out from behind a pillar, moving toward the edge of the stage. "I am here, Mom." Ah, there she is, my mother said, pointing a manicured finger at me. Our eldest. Zora has always been steady. She may not have the high-flying career or the exciting life that Tasha has, but she is a good worker. She is a wonderful administrative assistant, and we are so proud that she could be here tonight to help with the balloons and the seating charts. It is good to have someone who handles the small details so the rest of us can focus on the big picture. Laughter. Actual laughter from the crowd. It was not malicious from everyone, but it was dismissive. It was the laughter of people who accepted the hierarchy my mother had established. Tasha the queen, Zora the servant. My mother smiled, basking in the moment. She raised her glass. So let us toast to family, to success, and to knowing your place in the world. She was about to hand the microphone back to the band leader. She was about to step down and enjoy the rest of her night as the queen of the ball. She thought she was safe. She thought I was just going to stand there and take it like I had taken it for 34 years. But I was not standing there. I was walking up the stairs to the stage. The clicking of my heels on the wood floor echoed in the sudden silence. My mother looked at me, confusion flickering in her eyes. I was not supposed to be up here. This was not in the script. Zora, she hissed, moving the mic away from her mouth. What are you doing? Go sit down. You are embarrassing me. I did not look at her. I walked past her to the podium. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small black remote control. It controlled the projector screen that had been set up behind the stage, originally intended to show a slideshow of my parents' wedding photos. I had swapped the thumb drive 10 minutes ago. I reached for the microphone. My mother tried to pull it back, but I gripped it firmly. My hand was steady. My pain was gone. All that was left was the cold clarity of the executioner. Thank you, Mom. I said, my voice amplified, booming across the ballroom. That was a beautiful speech. You talked a lot about success tonight. You talked a lot about honesty. And you talked about who paid for this party. I looked out at the crowd. I saw Brad in the VIP section, his glass halfway to his mouth, freezing as he sensed the shift in the atmosphere. I saw Tasha, her smile faltering. I think it is important to give credit where credit is due, I continued. And since we are all family here, since we are all friends, I think it is time we celebrated the real accomplishments of the Williams family. Brad, you have been telling these nice people about your fund Apex Capital. You have been telling them about your returns. Brad stood up, panic flashing in his eyes. Zora, do not do this, he mouthed. I pointed the remote at the screen behind me. Let us look at the portfolio, shall we? I pressed the button. The screen flickered to life, but it was not a wedding photo. It was a document, a stark white document with a government seal. The room gasped. It was a termination letter. Sovereign Bank. Reason for termination: embezzlement of petty cash and falsification of records. I heard a glass shatter in the VIP section, and while we are looking at numbers, I said, my voice hard as diamond, let us look at how this evening was funded, because my mother seems to think Brad paid for it. I pressed the button again. The screen changed. It was a bank statement. A credit card statement. The header clearly read, unauthorized supplementary card. User Bernice Williams. Status fraud reported. And below it the list of declined charges from Aspen, the declined charges from the flight back, and the balance due. 0, I said. That is what Brad Miller has contributed to this family. 0 is what he has in his bank account. And 0 is the amount of patience I have left. I looked at my mother. She was trembling, her face a mask of horror. You wanted a show, Mom, I whispered, leaning in close so only she could hear before I addressed the room again. You wanted everyone to know who we really are. I turned back to the microphone. So let me introduce you to the real owner of this evening. I pressed the button one last time. The image on the massive projection screen flickered and stabilized. Gone was the grainy, sepia-toned photograph of my parents cutting their wedding cake in 1984. In its place, projected 10 feet tall for every member of the Chicago elite to see, was a PDF document. The resolution was crystal clear. The letterhead of Sovereign Bank was unmistakable in the upper left corner, and right below it, in bold black letters, was the subject line Notice of Termination for Cause. A hush fell over the ballroom that was so complete I could hear the hum of the projector fan. The clinking of silverware stopped. The jazz band had trailed off into an awkward silence. Every eye in the room moved from the screen to Brad, and then back to the screen. I did not look at the screen. I knew every word on it by heart. I looked at Brad. He was frozen in the VIP section, his face draining of color, until he looked like a wax figure melting under the stage lights. His mouth hung open slightly, a half-formed denial dying on his lips before he could even speak it. Beside him, the doctor he had been pitching to Dr. Evans slowly set his glass of cognac down on the table and pushed his chair back, putting physical distance between himself and my brother-in-law. I spoke into the microphone, my voice conversational, as if I were pointing out a detail in a family scrapbook. For those of you in the back who might have trouble reading the fine print, allow me to summarize. This is the official termination letter issued to Bradley Thomas Miller 6 months ago. As you can see in the second paragraph, the reason for termination is listed as misappropriation of branch funds, falsification of expense reports, and petty theft. I let the words hang there. Petty theft. It was such a small, ugly crime for a man who wore Armani suits. Brad told my family he was a vice president. He told his wife he was managing mergers and acquisitions. He told the investors sitting at that table right now that he was managing a hedge fund. But the truth is, Brad was a mid-level relationship manager who got fired for stealing cash from the drawer and expensing personal dinners as client meetings. He is not a financier. He is a liability. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I saw people pulling out their phones, snapping pictures of the screen. This was not just a scandal. This was a train wreck, and no one could look away. Brad stood up, then his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "That is a lie," he shouted, his voice cracking. "That is a forged document. She is lying. She is trying to ruin me because she is jealous." I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I simply pressed the button on the remote again. The screen shifted. The termination letter vanished, replaced by a bank statement. This one was even more damaging because it was personal. It was the transaction history for the platinum card my mother had used in Aspen. The card that was opened in my name. Red text highlighted the top of the document. Account status closed due to fraud. And below that, the list of declined transactions. The ski lift tickets, the hotel deposit, the $1,200 lunch at Cloud9. "My mother thinks you paid for their vacation, Brad," I said, my voice cutting through his shouting like a razor. "She stood on this stage 5 minutes ago and thanked you for your generosity. She thanked you for the first-class lifestyle." But looking at this statement, I am confused. Because this card is in my name. The social security number attached to it is mine. And the funds that paid for the flight out there came from my savings. I walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at him. He looked small now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the cornered, feral look of a rat that realizes the trap has snapped shut. "You charged $30,000 to a card you stole from me while I was in surgery," I continued. "And when I woke up and reported it, the bank declined the rest of your spending. That is why you came home early. Not because you missed us, but because you were broke. You could not even buy a burger at the airport without defrauding someone." The crowd was buzzing now, the sound rising like a tide. I saw the bishop shaking his head, a look of profound disappointment on his face. I saw my mother in the front row, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. She was looking at the screen, then at Brad, the realization crashing down on her that her golden son-in-law was fool's gold. But I was not done. There was one more nail to drive into the coffin. I clicked the remote one more time. The screen changed to a collection of legal notices, summonses, collection agency letters, all of them addressed to Brad Miller. But the address on the envelopes was not his luxury condo downtown. It was my address, my apartment number. "Brad," I said gently, leaning into the microphone, "you told everyone here you are a partner at Apex Capital. You told them you have offices in the Loop. You told me you were going to buy a mansion next month, so I have a question. I pointed at the screen behind me. Why are debt collectors sending final notices for a defaulted car loan to my apartment? Why did a process server come to my building yesterday looking for you? You used my address on your loan applications because you do not have one of your own, do you? You have been evicted from your last 2 apartments. You are using my home as a shield from your creditors because you have nowhere else to go. The room erupted. The facade was completely shattered. The investors in the VIP section were standing up, gathering their coats, looking at Brad with expressions of pure disgust. Dr. Evans leaned in and said something to Brad that made him flinch, then turned and walked away without looking back. Brad looked around the room. He saw the judgment. He saw the cameras. He saw his wife Tasha staring at him with black mascara running down her face, looking at him like he was a stranger. His world was collapsing in real time and he had nowhere to run. He looked at me, his face contorted, twisting into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. His hands curled into fists at his sides, the veins in his neck bulged. "You witch!" he screamed, the sound raw and animalistic. "You think you can do this to me? You think you can humiliate me like this? I will kill you!" He lunged. He knocked over the table with the expensive cognac, sending crystal flying. He charged toward the stage, his eyes locked on my throat. He moved fast, fueled by adrenaline and the destruction of his ego. The crowd screamed. My mother shrieked my name. I did not move. I did not flinch. I just watched him come, because I knew he would never reach me. Just as he reached the stairs to the stage, 2 large men in dark suits stepped out from the wings. They moved with the synchronized precision of professionals. One of them, a man with a neck as thick as a tree trunk, stepped directly into Brad's path. He did not hit him. He simply stopped him. He put one hand on Brad's chest and shoved. It was not a violent shove, but it was immovable. Brad stumbled back, losing his footing on the polished floor. He fell hard, landing on his backside in a puddle of spilled cognac. The second guard stepped up, crossing his arms over his chest. These were not the hotel security. These were private contractors I had hired specifically for this moment. I knew Brad. I knew that when he was cornered, he got violent, and I was done being a victim. Brad scrambled backward, trying to regain his dignity, but it was gone. He was sitting on the floor, wet, red-faced and impotent, blocked by men who were paid to ensure he could not touch me. I looked down at him from the safety of the stage. The microphone amplified my sigh. "It is over, Brad," I said. "The show is over. You do not have any investors. You do not have a job. And as of tonight, you do not have a reputation." I signaled to the guards. They stepped forward, flanking him. "Please escort Mr. Miller out," I said. "And make sure he does not take the cognac with him. He cannot afford it." The guards hauled him up by his arms. He tried to struggle, tried to shout again, but the fight had gone out of him. He looked at Tasha, pleading with his eyes, but she turned her face away, sobbing into her hands. He looked at my parents, but my father was staring at the floor, unable to witness the shame. As they dragged him toward the exit, the guests parted like the Red Sea, shrinking away from him to avoid the taint of his failure. The silence in the room was absolute, save for the sound of his shoes scuffing against the floor and the soft weeping of my sister. I watched him go until the double doors swung shut behind him. Then I turned back to the crowd. I turned back to my family. My mother was looking up at me, her face pale and terrified. She knew. She knew that Brad was just the appetizer. She knew that the main course was yet to be served. I clicked the remote one more time. The bank statement disappeared. The legal notices disappeared. A new document appeared on the screen. A deed, a mortgage note, and a foreclosure notice with my parents' names on it. I took a sip of water from the glass on the podium. "Now," I said, my voice ringing out in the silent ballroom, "let us talk about the house." The ballroom was in chaos, but it was a quiet, suffocating kind of chaos. The kind where people whisper behind their hands and look away when you catch their eye. I walked through the parted crowd feeling the eyes on me. Some were horrified, some were impressed, but most were just stunned. I didn't care. I wasn't doing this for their approval. I was doing this for my survival. I reached the double doors and pushed them open, stepping into the cool, carpeted hallway of the hotel. Marcus was waiting there holding my coat. He didn't say a word, just draped it over my shoulders and handed me my cane. I took it, leaning heavily on the handle. My back was on fire, but my soul felt like it had been put on ice. "Ready to go home, Miss Williams?" he asked softly. "Yes, Marcus," I said. "Take me home." We walked to the elevator, leaving the sounds of my family's destruction behind us. The ride down was silent. When the doors opened to the lobby, I saw the valet pulling up my car. It was a black SUV, understated and secure, just the way I liked it. I climbed into the back seat, wincing as I settled against the leather. Marcus got in the front. As we pulled away from the curb, I looked back at the hotel one last time. The lights of the ballroom were still glowing on the second floor. Inside, my mother was probably trying to spin a story to the bishop. Tasha was probably screaming at my father. Brad was probably sitting on the sidewalk wondering how his life had imploded so quickly. It didn't matter. None of it mattered anymore. They were my tenants now. They were my debtors. They existed in my world on my terms. My phone buzzed. I looked down. It was a text from Silas Vance. "Just heard from a friend at the Ritz. Remind me never to play poker with you, Zora. The dossier on Miller is impeccable. He's done in this town. And Zora, take the week off. You earned it." I smiled, a real smile this time. Silas Vance respected power. And tonight, I had shown him I had plenty of it. But the night wasn't over. I had one more stop to make, not physically but legally. I had destroyed their present. Now I had to secure their future my way. I opened my tablet and pulled up the draft of the document Henry had prepared. It was titled Family Restructuring Agreement. It was brutal. It was comprehensive. It was the only way they would ever learn. The terms were simple. One, Brad Miller would acknowledge the debt in writing. He would agree to a payment plan that garnished 50% of any future wages. He would be required to maintain full-time employment, regardless of the job. No more consulting, no more entrepreneurship. If he missed a payment or if he filed for divorce to escape the debt, the evidence of his fraud, the wire transfers, the fake invoices, the identity theft would be sent directly to the district attorney. I held his freedom in one hand and his debt in the other. He would work until he paid me back every cent, even if he had to scrub floors to do it. 2. My parents would sign a lease agreement for the house. The rent would be equal to the property taxes and insurance costs. I wasn't going to make a profit on them, but I wasn't going to subsidize them anymore. They would live on their pension. They would sell the Cadillac. They would sell the jewelry if they had to. If they couldn't afford the lifestyle, they would downsize. They would live within their means for the first time in decades. 3. Tasha, my golden sister. Her credit card was canceled. Her allowance was gone. She would be required to get a job. Any job. Retail service, I didn't care. She would contribute to the household expenses if she wanted to keep living under the roof I owned. And she would return every single item she had borrowed from me, or I would deduct the value from the grocery budget I allocated to the house. It was a harsh sentence. It was a prison of their own making, but it was also a lifeline. I was keeping them off the street. I was keeping Brad out of jail for now. I was giving them a chance to be decent, hardworking people. Whether they took it was up to them. I arrived at my building. The doorman greeted me, his face impassive. I went up to the penthouse. The apartment was dark and quiet. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights reflecting off the lake. I was alone. But for the first time, I didn't feel lonely. I felt strong. I felt capable. I had faced the people who were supposed to love me, the people who had used me and discarded me, and I had won. I poured myself a glass of water from the tap. No crystal pitcher this time, just a glass. I drank it standing up looking at the city I helped run. Tomorrow they would come to me. They would cry. They would beg. They would try to manipulate me with guilt and memories of a childhood that never really existed the way they claimed. But I was ready. I had the paperwork. I had the leverage. And most importantly, I had the truth. I wasn't Zora the secretary anymore. I wasn't Zora the doormat. I was Zora the landlord. And rent was due. I went to my bedroom and lay down on the bed. The pain in my back was fading, replaced by a deep, heavy exhaustion. I closed my eyes and let myself drift. The next morning, the sun rose cold and bright over Chicago. I woke up, stretched carefully, and rang the bell for Marcus. "Breakfast?" he asked, entering the room. "Yes," I said. "Something substantial. I have a big meeting today." "With who?" "With my tenants," I said. "They should be arriving at 9 sharp." At 8:55 the buzzer rang. I checked the monitor. It was them. My father looking gray and defeated. My mother, eyes swollen, wearing a tracksuit instead of her designer gear. Tasha looking small and frightened. And Brad trailing behind them, his shoulders slumped, the arrogance completely drained out of him. They looked like what they were, a family who had lost everything and had nowhere else to go. I buzzed them in. I sat at the head of my dining table, the documents spread out in front of me. I didn't offer them coffee. I didn't offer them a seat. I waited until they were all standing in front of me like school children in the principal's office. "Good morning," I said. "I hope you slept well, because we have a lot of work to do." My father stepped forward. "Zora," he said, his voice cracking. We are so sorry." "I know," I said. "But sorry doesn't pay the mortgage. Sign here." I pushed the papers across the table. They signed. One by one they signed away their pride, their delusions, and their freedom. They signed because they had no choice. They signed because I had outplayed them at their own game. When it was done, I collected the papers. "Good," I said. "Now, Brad, I believe there is a position open at the car wash on 55th Street. They are hiring. You start tomorrow." Brad looked at me, hate burning in his eyes, but he nodded. "Yes, Zora." "And Mom," I said, "the grocery budget is $500 a week. Coupons are in the Sunday paper. I suggest you start clipping." My mother nodded, tears leaking from her eyes. "Yes, Zora." "Tasha," I said, "my shoes. Now." Tasha bent down, took off the Louboutins and placed them on the table. She was barefoot. "You can leave now," I said. They turned and walked out of my apartment, a silent, broken procession. I watched them go. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel sadness. I just felt done. I picked up my shoes and walked to the window. The city was waking up below me. The world was moving on. And so was I. 1 month later, I was on a plane, first class, paid for with my own money. I was going to Aspen, not to ski, just to sit in a chalet, drink champagne, and look at the snow. I checked my phone before takeoff. A notification popped up. 75 missed calls from Mom. I looked at it. I smiled. I pressed block. Then I put on my sunglasses, leaned back in the seat, and watched the ground fall away. I was flying, and this time I wasn't paying for anyone's baggage, but my own. The ballroom cleared out with the speed of a sinking ship. The guests, the bishop, the neighbors, they all fled the scene of the disaster, leaving behind half-eaten shrimp cocktails and the heavy, suffocating scent of scandal. I did not watch them go. I walked straight to the private VIP suite behind the stage where my security team had corralled the remnants of my family. When I entered the room, the air was thick enough to choke on. My mother was slumped on a velvet sofa, her red gown looking like a costume from a play that had been canceled mid-performance. Tasha was pacing, her mascara streaked down her face, muttering to herself. And Brad was there sitting on a folding chair in the corner, flanked by my guards. They had brought him back in through the service entrance at my request. He looked less like a finance mogul now, and more like a man who had just realized he was standing on a trap door. I closed the door behind me. The click of the latch was the only sound in the room. "Please sit down, Tasha," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. She froze, then sank onto the sofa next to our mother. I walked to the center of the room and placed a stack of documents on the low coffee table. They were crisp white and final. "You have all spent the last few years living in a fantasy." I began looking from one face to the next. "You thought you were rich. You thought you were successful. You thought you could use me as a stepping stone and kick me away when you were done. Tonight the fantasy ends. Welcome to reality." I picked up the first document and looked at Brad. He flinched when I said his name. "Brad, this is a confession of judgment and a repayment agreement. It acknowledges that you owe me personally for the unauthorized credit card charges, the legal fees I incurred to acquire your bad debt, and the interest that has accrued on your defaulted loans. The total is just over $212,000. He stared at me, his eyes hollow. "I do not have that kind of money, Zora. You know I do not." "I know," I said. "That is why I have arranged employment for you." I made a few calls. "There is a construction crew working on a development in the West Loop. They need general laborers. It is minimum wage hard work and long hours. You start Monday." Laborer. Brad sputtered, a flicker of his old arrogance trying to spark. "I am a finance professional. I wear suits. I do not dig ditches." "You are a felon who has not been charged yet," I corrected him cold. "And if you do not sign this paper, if you do not show up to that job on Monday, or if you try to leave the state, I will hand this entire file to the district attorney. The wire fraud, the identity theft, the embezzlement from your old bank. I have it all, Brad. You can either work for me and pay me back every single cent, or you can work for the state making license plates. It makes no difference to me." He looked at Tasha for help, but she was staring at the floor, picking at a loose sequin on her dress. He looked at my father, who turned his head away. Brad slumped the fight, leaving his body like air from a punctured balloon. He reached for the pen. His hand shook as he signed his life away. "Good," I said, taking the paper back. "Now, Mom, Dad." Bernice looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "Zora, please. We are your parents. You cannot do this to us. We are old. We cannot go to jail." "I am not sending you to jail." "Mom," I said. "I am not that cruel. But I am not your bank anymore. I am your landlord." I slid the deed transfer and lease agreement toward them. "I own the house now." The bank was happy to sell the note rather than deal with a foreclosure. "You can stay there. It is your home and I want you to have a roof over your heads. But things are going to change." My father looked at the papers, his hands trembling. "What kind of changes?" "First," I said, "you are going to sell the Cadillac. It is a lease you cannot afford. You will get a sensible used car. Second, Mom, you are going to sell your furs and that jewelry collection you love to show off. The proceeds will go toward the back taxes you owe on the house. And third, you will pay rent. It will be fair based on Dad's pension, but you will pay it every month. If you miss a payment, you will downsize to a one-bedroom apartment. Do you understand?" My mother let out a sob. "But what will people think? The Cadillac, the bridge club. Everyone thinks we are doing so well. They already know the truth." "Mom," I said. "They were in the ballroom. They saw the slides. The only person who still cares about appearances is you. And frankly, you cannot afford your pride anymore." She buried her face in her hands. It was a harsh lesson, but necessary. She had spent decades spending money she did not have to impress people who did not care. It had to stop. Tasha looked up, her voice small. "What about me?" "You," I said, looking at my sister. "You are going to get a job. A real one. No more influencing. No more shopping with my money. You are going to contribute to the household expenses if you want to keep living there." "And Tasha," she flinched. "Yes, my shoes," I said. "Take them off. Now." She blinked, tears leaking from her eyes. Here, yes. Here. You do not deserve to walk in my shoes. You never did. She unbuckled the Louboutins and slid them off, placing them on the table next to the legal documents. She sat there in her stocking feet, looking small and defeated. I gathered the papers. The room was silent save for my mother's soft weeping. It was done. I had stripped them of their delusions. I had secured my assets. I had ensured that they would never be able to hurt me financially again. I turned to leave. I wanted to get out of there. I wanted to go home to my quiet apartment and sleep for a week. Zora. It was my father. Louis. He had not spoken a word since I entered the room. He stood up slowly, his joints creaking. He looked older than he had an hour ago. He looked like a man who had just watched his entire world dissolve. I stopped my hand on the doorknob. "What is it, Dad?" He walked toward me, stopping a few feet away. He did not look angry. He did not look defensive. He looked shattered. "I am sorry," he said. His voice was rough, cracking in the middle. "Not for the money, not for the house. I am sorry that we made you feel like you had to do this. I am sorry that we did not protect you. I am sorry that I let your mother, that I let us treat you like an option instead of a daughter." I stared at him. It was the apology I had wanted for 20 years. It was the words I had dreamed of hearing when I was a little girl, crying in my room because they had forgotten my birthday. It was the validation I had sought every time I achieved something great and was met with silence, and I felt nothing. It was too late. The words were right, but the timing was fatal. He was apologizing because he had lost. He was apologizing because I held the deed to his house. If I had failed, if I had been the broke secretary they thought I was, this apology would never have come. He would still be drinking champagne in Aspen, laughing at my expense. I looked him in the eye. "Thank you, Dad," I said, "but apologies do not pay the mortgage, and they do not fix a spine that was broken while you were skiing." I opened the door. "We will set up auto pay for the rent," I said. "Do not make me evict you." I walked out into the hallway, the heavy door closing behind me with a final decisive click. I walked down the long corridor of the Ritz-Carlton, my heels silent on the plush carpet. I did not look back. I did not cry. I took the elevator down to the lobby. My car was waiting. I got in and told the driver to take me home. As the city lights blurred past the window, I felt a strange lightness in my chest. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't joy. It was the absence of weight. I had carried them for so long. I had carried their expectations, their debts, their judgments. And tonight, I had set the burden down. They were on their own now. And for the first time in my life, so was I. And I had never felt more powerful. 30 days is a lifetime when you are rewriting the script of your existence. My back has healed with a speed that surprised even Dr. Patel. Perhaps it is because I am no longer carrying the dead weight of 3 grown adults on my spine. The physical therapy was grueling, but every squat, every stretch, every mile on the treadmill felt like shedding a layer of the person I used to be. The Zora who apologized for taking up space is gone. In her place is a woman who walks into a boardroom and watches billionaires stand up to greet her. Yesterday, the managing partners called me into the corner office. They did not ask me to fetch coffee. They asked me to take the lead on the firm's international portfolio. They made me a senior partner. My salary has doubled, but the money is just a number now. The real currency is the respect. It is the way Silas Vance nods at me across the table, acknowledging me as an equal. It is the way my team looks at me not just as a fixer, but as a leader who survived the fire and came out forged in steel. I decided to celebrate. I booked a trip. Not a frantic last-minute escape funded by fraud, but a carefully curated experience paid for with the dividends of my own hard work. I am going back to Aspen. I am going to stay in the suite my family tried to steal. I am going to drink the champagne they ordered but never got to taste. I am going to rewrite that memory until the snow is just snow, not a symbol of my abandonment. I walked through the terminal at O'Hare, my heels clicking rhythmically on the polished terrazzo. I was wearing a cream-colored cashmere coat and carrying a bag that I had bought for myself, not for Tasha. The air smelled of coffee and jet fuel, the scent of possibility. I bypassed the long security lines, flashing my priority pass, and headed toward the first-class lounge. As I walked past the food court, avoiding the gaze of the weary travelers hunched over their fast food, a flash of movement near the recycling bins caught my eye. A man in a gray jumpsuit was struggling with an overflowing trash bag. He looked exhausted, his shoulders slumped, his hair matted with sweat under a generic cap. He turned to heave the bag into his cart, and the fluorescent light caught his face. It was Brad. I stopped. The crowd flowed around me like a river around a stone. Brad looked up, sensing the eyes on him. He froze. He looked terrible. The arrogance that had defined his features for years had been sanded away by a month of minimum wage labor. His skin was sallow, his eyes hollowed out by the reality of his new life. He wasn't wearing an Armani suit. He was wearing a polyester uniform with a name tag that read, "Probationary Staff." He saw me. He saw the cashmere coat. He saw the Rimowa luggage. He saw the way I stood tall and straight, my spine fused and strong. For a moment I thought he might shout. I thought he might try to approach me, to beg, to threaten to summon some ghost of his old bluster. But he didn't. He looked at the security guard standing 10 feet away. He looked at the debt repayment schedule that I knew was burning a hole in his pocket. He remembered the file I held, the one that could send him to prison if he stepped out of line. His eyes dropped to the floor. He gripped the handle of his trash cart, his knuckles white, and turned away, pushing his burden toward the service elevators. He was shrinking, disappearing into the background of a life he used to think he was too good for. I watched him go. I didn't feel a surge of triumph. I didn't feel the need to gloat. I just felt a quiet, clinical satisfaction. The balance sheet was corrected. The debt was being paid. I turned and walked to the lounge. I ordered a glass of sparkling water with a twist of lemon. I sat by the window and watched the planes taxiing on the runway, giant metal birds preparing to conquer the sky. When they called my flight, I was the first to board. Seat 1A. The flight attendant took my coat and offered me a pre-departure beverage. "Champagne, Ms. Williams?" she asked with a smile. I looked at the crystal flute. I thought about the $1,200 lunch bill at Cloud 9. I thought about the text message from Tasha telling me I was ruining the vibe. "Yes," I said. "I would love some champagne." She poured it, the bubbles rising in a golden column. I took a sip. It was cold, crisp, and tasted entirely like freedom. I reached into my bag to switch my phone to airplane mode. The screen lit up with a notification. It wasn't an email from work. It wasn't a text from a client. It was a summary from my call log. 75 missed calls. All from Mom. They had started an hour ago. 75 calls in 60 minutes. That wasn't a casual chat. That was a panic spiral. Maybe the water heater had broken in the house I owned. Maybe Tasha had refused to go to her shift at the mall. Maybe my father had finally realized that his pension didn't cover the country club dues anymore. I stared at the number. 75. It was almost poetic. It was a testament to their desperation, a numerical value assigned to their regret. They were calling the bank. They were calling the fixer. They were calling the daughter they had discarded, hoping that if they rang the bell loud enough, I would come running back to serve them. They didn't realize the service entrance was closed. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I didn't wonder what the emergency was. Whatever it was, they had a roof over their heads and food in the fridge. They had more than they had left me with. They could figure it out. They were adults. They were my tenants. And the lease didn't include emotional labor. I pressed my thumb against the contact name. A menu popped up. I scrolled down to the bottom past Add to Favorites, past Share Contact. I pressed Block Caller. Then I did the same for Tasha and my father. The phone went silent. The notifications cleared. The screen was just a smooth black mirror reflecting my own face. I looked calm. I looked ready. I put the phone away. I reached into my bag and pulled out a pair of oversized sunglasses. I slid them onto my face, shielding my eyes from the glare of the winter sun streaming through the porthole. The pilot's voice came over the intercom announcing our departure. The engines roared to life, a deep, powerful vibration that I felt in my bones. I leaned back in the wide leather seat. I took another sip of champagne. The plane began to move, gathering speed, rushing toward the horizon. I didn't look back at the terminal. I didn't look back at the city. I looked forward at the blue sky waiting above the clouds. My name is Zora. I am 34 years old, and for the first time in my life, I am flying solo. And the view from up here is absolutely magnificent.